Good evening. Today is December 5th, 2018. It's 5 p.m. Alaska Standard Time. About 21 degrees above zero outside here. How about you guys up there?
Yeah, I think we were about 25 a bit ago. Rather warm,
Yep,
for sure.
Outside tonight. We're going to go ahead and quickly get started here. This meeting is private. I want to give a warning to any agents representing any incorporated entities out there. This meeting is private. Bearing false witness, misrepresentation, and posting inflammatory rhetoric in public forums is forbidden and shall be addressed in an appropriate manner. To eliminate all conflict and false allegations, is there anyone in attendance on this call or on tonight's show that's a member or agent of any law enforcement agency or public agency of the federal, state, county, city, or township agencies present? Either listening in electronically or actually on the call tonight. If you're here, just let us know. And based on what we can see from the call, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, Wendell's here.
All right. Good to hear you, Wendell. And that was a no. I think I heard you right.
I broke in. I don't know what you're voting on something. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, we were just saying if there's anybody that's a secret agent on our call, let us know. And that's when you broke in. So, okay, good deal. If you are on this call, and now I'm not talking to you, Wendell, I'm talking to the general hearing audience. If you are here by any means, electronic, listening device or otherwise, in order to gather information for any incorporated entity in order to subvert us, undermine, overthrow, or otherwise destroy our lawful, peaceable effort, will be pursued in your individual and personal capacity for crimes against humanity and for any harm, injury, or loss you cause to your fellow man on the private side. Tonight we're here to we're going to be talking about a treatise on arrest and false imprisonment, which is a treatise written by Charles A. Weisman. And the purpose of the treatise and of our show tonight is the restoration of our understanding of the basics of what constitutes common law on arrest. And you might think, why should I care about the common law? You may at this point be thinking there is no federal common law. But I say to you, if you care about being an American, if you believe that we can make America great again, there's no greater study you can undertake than this one, because this is in large part, or at the very least, a basic building block that has been lost to us. One very important way we've been deprived of freedom in this country, and if we expect to be ignorant and free, we expect what never was and what never will be. If you don't know your rights, you can't enforce them, you've lost them. Your ignorance of the law is no excuse. Your ignorance of the common law on arrest puts your freedom in grave peril. So get this treatise, and I've sent it out with the show promos for tonight. Take a few hours to understand it. It's going to take you 3 or 4 hours to study this 80 pages. And what we're going to do tonight is just cover some of the basics. But you really do have to go back in and study the finer points. If we do this well tonight, you'll be motivated to get this up to the top of your to-do list or your study list. And again, I just want to make it really clear that you can go out onto Scribd. You can search it on the interwebs. You can write to me at rental@reagan.com in my email. I'll send it directly out to you. And so, because I think it's extremely important, and I happen to know from firsthand experience, this is not what the police are being trained on as far as what their responsibility constitutes, what constitutes a proper lawful arrest. They're actually trained to exploit the exceptions. and we're going to talk about the exceptions as well so that you can see it right away how they're exploiting the exceptions. They're not being trained on the common law on arrest, even though that is ultimately what the superior courts in the states do uphold. We'll get into exactly where you can find the states upholding this common law on arrest. And we'll give you references for how you can verify that that's true, that the states do uphold the common law on arrest. But what we're going to cover is a few things. What constitutes a lawful arrest, the only two exceptions to the general rule, 3 definitions of a properly executed warrant, the definition of a felony, the definition of a breach of peace, and then into the state annotated statutes, why we should care about these annotated statutes, and due process versus statutes, how you make a claim of false imprisonment, who has the burden of proof on a claim of false imprisonment. If we can, we'll talk about peace officers versus code enforcers, what the law is on being taken directly to the magistrate, and just basically anything else that we could cover in this that allows you to be free from fear. And that really is the name of the game. Take standing, be free from fear. Later on, if we get Chuck and Peter on the call at the same time, I know Chuck wanted some help from Peter in Pennsylvania on some of these notices that you guys have been sharing from time to time. So at this point, are there any questions before we get into the treatise? Okay. So first of all, I'll introduce this, and if you look at it's really extremely exciting. Page 2 and 3 in the treatise is an introduction. This book is about liberty. It's about the lawful and unlawful means by which government acts in depriving an individual of his liberty. History teaches that deprivation of liberty is more often arbitrary and unlawful than otherwise. So this is always how they've gotten us all through history, by our ignorance. Because Daniel Webster once stated this problem in these words: the contest for the ages has been to rescue liberty from the grasp of executive power. And liberty is taken away or deprived most commonly by arrest and imprisonment. The practice of easy arrests and secret imprisonments has always been an earmark of a despotic executive power, no different than now. To compound this problem, we have the legislative mills, which turn out thousands of new laws every year. So they pass all kinds of laws. Right now we've got a total of 80 million laws that have been passed. And why do we have so many laws? There's the book, 3 Felonies a Day, that will tell you that every day that you go about your business in a normal way, you've committed 3 felonies. So it basically allows the administrative courts to come out and start charging you, and it actually, the bottom line is they want money. And it says that the passion of the modern legislatures to regulate every facet of our lives is notorious. It becomes doubly intolerable if every zealous officer is authorized to arrest on sight every person whom he detects is breaking one of these so-called laws. No one can be safe to leave their home or travel about for fear of being subject to thousands of unknown laws in which he could be instantly arrested for transgressing. I have been, a bunch of you guys have been, Chuck has been, Wendell has been, subject to laws that are just the statute. People no longer live their lives in a little village where they were born. They go from place to place through innumerable towns and villages, and the risk of being arrested on sight because one's conduct contravenes some regulation which the wisdom of the local salons deems necessary. It's appalling to any thinking person, it would be impossible to know at what moment one might become amenable to arrest. The history of our ancestors over the centuries teaches that people cannot be free where the executive power can arbitrarily arrest or imprison citizens. So just to get right down to the, and as I read through this the first time, I never realized how jealous the law is of our liberty. I think we've been dumbed down to such a point that we don't even realize how important we are and how important it is that those in power cannot take us and lock us in a cage for nothing. So on this, please read page 3 because it's talking about how important it is that the powers that be not be have the license basically to forcefully deprive a man of freedom to go wherever he may. It's clearly a trespass. False imprisonment was indeed one of the first trespasses recognized by the common law. False imprisonment is a great offense due to the high regard the law has for liberty, and it gives you lots of references. Blackstone's commentaries. Every confinement of the person is an imprisonment, whether it be in a common prison or in a private house or in the stocks or even by forcibly detaining one in the public streets. So when the lights go on, you're imprisoned. So if you're forced to pull over in your car, the lights have come on, that's an imprisonment. So what we've got to know is, was it a lawful imprisonment or an unlawful imprisonment? And this goes into extreme detail. False imprisonment has been well defined to be a trespass committed by one man against the person of another by unlawfully arresting him and detaining him without legal authority. So what is it that constitutes a lawful arrest? Okay, you don't have to be a lawyer. You don't even have to be someone smart to remember what these things are. It's extremely simple. There's only one type of lawful arrest, and that is arrest by properly signed and executed warrant. There's only 2 exceptions to arrest with a warrant. The 2 exceptions are that there's probable cause that a felony has been committed or is about to be committed, or a breach of the peace is committed in the officer's presence. So that is it. That's all. That's the simplicity. Either they have a warrant that they can put in your hand and present to you, and you can find a blue ink signature on that warrant. The warrant also has to have a couple of things which we'll get into later, but it's either an arrest by warrant or it's a felony offense, and a felony is extremely well defined. The breaches of peace are well defined at common law. So if it's a moving violation, if it's some kind of made-up offense by the legislature, that's not a felony. A felony is murder, rape, kidnapping, sodomy, abortion, treason, and arson. A breach of the peace is not up to the officer's discretion. He can't just say, oh, this man was committing a breach of the peace. But breach of the peace is well defined as well. And that's what you'll find out as you go through this. Some people thought it was a breach of the peace for somebody to be drunk in public. Not so. And at other times, people thought playing baseball on a Sunday was breach of the peace. Not so. So it's well settled law what constitutes a breach of the peace. And that's one of those distinctions that we've got to get down and get into when we start to look at what the law is on arrest. So any questions at this point at all?
Yeah. Hello, Maria.
Oh, hey, John. Got any questions on the so far?
I just got on there, and but correct me if you think my thinking is wrong here, but I think you're defining these things according to our definitions of those. And if you're not, if you're defining it through the de facto, then it may be a situation where the de facto defines things however in the hell they wish to at any given time.
Yeah, no, I totally understand your sentiment on it, but we're going to answer through that. Have you got a copy of the document that we're going through, Treatise on Arrest and False Imprisonment? It was included in the promotion of tonight's show.
What's that again? Treatise on what now?
Yeah, it was an attachment on the promotion I sent you via email today or yesterday. Treatise on Arrest and False Imprisonment. We're going to get into.
Okay, I don't want to distract you from what you're doing, but I will find it and bring it up. That's okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay. All right. No problem. And one thing I want to make sure that we try to do at times here is we're covering the documents. We're covering what we've got as basically as references and as evidence that we're right about common law being enforceable. And so we're going to get into that idea that this is what's being this is what is enforced in Alaska, in fact, if you know where to find it and if you know how to deal with it. So first of all, we got to know.
One quick question. This document that you attached, do you consider that a common law document?
I consider it a treatise, so that means it's got references that you can look up on the public record. So it's not just the guy's opinion. It's not an opinion piece. He's giving references right within the material.
No, I understand that part, but I was just curious as to whether it is more uniquely a common law document or is it applicable also to the de facto?
Okay, well, can I answer that as we go through? I'm going to get your question answered.
Go.
And what it is, and I'll give you another reference to find out if what I'm saying is true, and that is what is considered to be the common law. And if you go out and search for Richard Cornforth, and I've put it up on my YouTube channel. The YouTube channel is called Maria Rensel, and if you look under Decoding Roman Law, you'll find 3 videos in which it's Richard Cornforth talking about what is common law. And his definition is that it's the annotated statutes in the states. So what are the annotated statutes? And what those are, you can find them in the law library under annotated statutes. And those are the decisions of the state Supreme Court. So if you look in this treatise that that we're reading through, what you're going to find is state Supreme Court decisions of the Supreme Court of Michigan, for example, here on page 9. The law governing this case is elementary. Elementary law, says the Supreme Court of Michigan. That means everybody knows this is true. Except for a breach of the peace committed in his presence or when he has reasonable ground to believe that a person arrested is a felon or is about to commit a felony, a police officer has no authority to arrest without warrant. So that is the common law of Michigan, what the Supreme Court of Michigan has found. And as we go through, we'll learn more. But you can find out from Richard Cornforth that indeed the common law is what the states, even statutorily, even the de facto recognizes that the state Supreme Court pronounce what they call the common law. That's not the same as what we talk about as common law in the early American colonies, our unique American common law, but it is the way the lawyers recognize it. So just to reiterate, there's only one proper way to arrest, and that is with a warrant. There are only two exceptions to arrest with a warrant, and that is probable cause that a felony is about to be committed or has been committed. In other words, the guy got caught red-handed, so he can be arrested without the warrant, or a breach of the peace, which is also really well defined. So those are the two exceptions. Definition of a properly executed warrant. Okay, and that is okay. We're moving past Chapter 3, arrest without warrant. But I do want to point out something in Chapter 3 of this treatise, and that is just read the complaint by Charles A. Weisman against the defendant, who is the copper who arrested him. Just read right through that, and then especially read the Memorandum of Law on Arrest Without Warrant, because Charles A. Weisman was arrested by a copper in Minnesota under the guise of, okay, there's a statute in place. So if you look down the arguments and statements of law, it says, since the arrest deprived Charles Weisman of his liberty by an act not pursuant to due process of law, the arrest is unlawful. Due process is not determined by the legislature. And then he includes a court case. It's a U.S. Supreme Court case that says it's manifest. It is not left to the legislative power to exact any process which might be devised. The due process article is a restraint on the legislative as well as on the executive and judicial powers of government, and cannot be so construed as to leave Congress free to make any process, due process of law, by its mere will. So if something is done outside of due process, there's no statute, there's no legislature or executive or judicial power that can abrogate due process of law. So having a properly signed warrant, having a warrant that is backed up by facts and not just feelings, having a warrant that the warrant has to have attached to it an affidavit sworn and by the witness that a crime has been committed. So there has to be a sworn affidavit backing up the warrant, the reason for the arrest. And there is supposed to be, my understanding is there's supposed to be a bond, a public performance bond with the warrant, so that if whoever's going out to arrest somebody causes some kind of a problem, they're insured against any harm that they might cause the public. And then the other thing that I haven't been able to find this yet, but there's supposed to be a return receipt. Once the warrant has been executed properly, it goes back to the clerk of the court and lets the clerk of the court know that it's that warrant's been acted upon and somebody's been arrested. And so what's happening out there is that people are playing fast and loose with the process. All of this is part of due process. If we don't, this is what I'm so interested in, and that is restoring our knowledge of due process, because if we don't restore our knowledge of it, we're not going to be able to enforce it. So there are elements of this that we have to kind of drill down into to understand fully that what is the due process? So as far as, the first thing is that we have to understand what's a lawful, what constitutes a lawful arrest, what the two exceptions are, what we can expect from the warrant, what the warrant should look like, that it has to be based on something also lawful, and that using the excuse that there's a statute in place that allows cops to do whatever they want is just an excuse. And so we've got to be able to call them out on that, because there is no legislative power that can deprive us of our due process. One of the things that you'll find out as you run through this, hold phone for, okay. One of the things that you'll find out as you go through this, go through the treatise is that one of the big things Charles Weisman is saying is that what has happened, I'm not sure what the problem is there, but I'm getting a little bit of reverb. Okay. What do we need to do? John, your speakers might be turned up a little too high again. A little too loud. We're getting some feedback there.
I got them turned down quite low now.
Okay. All right. Well, Bill's were kind of regulating it on the chat room. So, okay. So anyway, one of the big problems that Charles Weisman is talking about in this treatise is the fact that not bringing up the proper arguments when you're arrested, you're placed under false arrest and imprisonment, or arrest and false imprisonment, is that we make a fatal error. And the fatal error, he says, is that we don't claim due process violations. So, if you are, for example, Chuck's last arrest, by these rules, there was no probable cause that a felony was about to be committed. There was some kind of a statute that the troopers were relying on to arrest him, and so by definition, it meets the definition of a false imprisonment. He was taken up off the street for doing something that the statute doesn't allow, which is to cover up his VIN number with a piece of paper. And so he was taken off and put in a cage. And so he's a victim of a false imprisonment, rather than being an actual criminal that they arrested because a felony was about to be committed. They placed him under a false arrest, and so he actually has a claim against the guys. The fact that they're bringing him to, they're pressing charges against him is an example. What you'll find out in this essay is called a malicious prosecution, and that has various elements that have to be met. But once a false imprisonment is made, and one of us people out here on the land makes a claim of false imprisonment, the burden of proof shifts. I think I'm hearing you. Are you, John?
Yes?
I think I'm hearing you mumble.
Hearing me mumble?
Yeah.
I'm not mumbling.
Are you reading?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I could hear you reading aloud. It's coming over. And
I didn't think that I was, but I'll be aware of that then, all right?
Okay, all right, thanks. So anyway, once the man who is been arrested makes a claim of false imprisonment, the burden of proof shifts to those officers. So that's one thing to kind of keep, to give you a heads up that if you are the victim of a false imprisonment, because the law now, the burden of proof is not on you to prove that you were falsely imprisoned. The burden of proof is on the state, because the law is such a jealous guardian of our liberty, is the way it's put in this essay, in this treatise. But you'll want to know where you can find that. You'll go to the state annotated statutes, and if you look at the state annotated statutes, I've done this recently in Alaska, gone up to the law library at UAF and looked at the decisions that have been made by the Supreme Court when somebody appeals this to the level of the Supreme Court. The annotated statutes or that case law goes right along with what I'm saying and what Charles Weisman is saying is the common law on arrest. It's well-settled law. The justices in the Supreme Court of Alaska know that it's well-settled law. So if somebody knows enough to take this to the level of the Supreme Court and really continue fighting it, they don't have any choice. So you look down the cases that have been decided in Alaska on this issue, and there's no question that our Alaska Supreme Court upholds this common law on arrest, and what it looks like to me is it's being upheld all across all of the states, except for the fact that you've got some kind of a contract with the state, and that is in the form of the driver's license. And what Charles Weisman says in this treatise, and what I believe is the truth, is that at the time when the statute came in to allow driver's license for all people driving their private automobiles, nobody stood up and fought it and said this is a denial of our due process of law. So because they didn't raise the issue properly, and they didn't say this is an unlawful statute, then it was a fatal error. And anybody who's basically dumb enough to take out a contract with the corporation that runs their state and says, I'll abide by your contract, they're going to be, they're going to be subject to arrest and false imprisonment as if by their consent and their knowledge. Because the statutes in all the states say that if you're in a contract with your state, and if you're in agreement to have a driver's license, then you agree that at any time that you must always keep your driver's license and your registration of your vehicle with you. It's got to be on you at all times, and at any time a peace officer or now a code enforcement officer may stop you and require you to show those. And it seems to me that what these guys have been acting on this whole time is that you have a contract with this corporation that runs your state, and so they can do what they want. They can stop you, and if you don't display those items for them, if you don't show your papers, they're going to be taking you off to jail. If they don't take you off to jail, you've agreed in that contract to accept service of process. So if the district attorney decides that he's going to charge you for something, then you've already said, okay, you can serve me at such and such an address. You're allowed to serve me. You can basically hunt me down and charge me. And so that's been the problem, is just our lack of knowledge in order to just keep this idea of due process. We've always had the remedy that we can fight against this with calling for due process in the court. We can still do that. And in this treatise, you can look at page 13, 14, as well as page 18 and find out, again, that the legislature has no power to replace due process with any sort of a statute. The difference between a peace officer and a code enforcer is pretty obvious. The peace officer was empowered to arrest people that were breaching the peace, so he had the authority to take people off the street that were breaching the peace in order to restore peace. Now with the code enforcement officers, they're enforcing those 80 million laws in order to profit the corporations they're working for. And there's just one other aspect I wanted to cover before we start talking questions, clarifications, and comments, and that is the law on being taken directly to the magistrate. One more surprising thing about this treatise on arrest and false imprisonment is that the only purpose that the peace officer has, or even the code enforcement officer, I would venture to say, the whole purpose of them of arresting you is for one purpose, and that is not so that they can detain you and lock you in a cage. The purpose is to take you before a magistrate. And it's really well outlined in here. Look at page 39, 46, 49, and 53. All of those address this. It talks about the Fourth Amendment's been badly violated in these arrests, but we find that the due process of law provision is virtually ignored when it comes to warrants. A warrant of arrest is a written order issued by a court or a magistrate directed to a peace officer or a specified private person commanding him to arrest the named person. It's regarded as fundamental law that the warrant must be acquired and be in the actual possession of the one making the arrest, otherwise he's not protected by it. So the warrant is there to protect the peace officer making the arrest. The requirement of having the warrant for arrest in actual possession is a common law rule and thus part of the due process of law. Now, in Chuck's case also, he asked for the warrant and in the last arrest, he asked for the warrant in the previous time he was arrested, and the North Pole City cop said we don't have to do that anymore. So there has been some act of the legislature again here in Alaska that hasn't been challenged on the due process angle. So somebody's got to make that challenge. Okay, and this is more, actually 46 and 47 are more on, it's more about invalid and unlawful warrants. A warrant must have certain requisites in order to render it valuable and available as a defense. Many unlawful arrests have been made due to warrants failing to meet such requisites. Whenever a warrant is invalid on its face and where it is only a summons, the officer arresting the defendants will be liable in damages. A prima facie invalid warrant will be regarded as no warrant, and the officer making an arrest by a void or invalid warrant is not protected by it. If a warrant, order, or writ of possession shows lack of jurisdiction of the court, the officer is not protected in serving it. A warrant must show that the warrant on its face is legal, that the magistrate had jurisdiction of the subject matter. Both a proper subject matter jurisdiction and geographical jurisdiction are necessary for a valid warrant. Neither consent nor waiver can give jurisdiction. Such limitations were designed to make government follow certain established procedures and thus making things difficult in order to deprive a citizen of his liberty or property. A rubber-stamped warrant is invalid on its face as it is not signed by any judicial officer. The authorization for a warrant required not only judicial authority, but is to be done by one who is learned in the law to determine if probable cause exists to issue the warrant. So this is talking about rubber-stamped warrants that basically have been brought before a magistrate or justice of the peace. And it's a blatantly unlawful practice. It's been adopted for convenience sake, but of course convenience is the most common reason or excuse that government uses to transcend constitutional and common law limitations. Chapter 7 gets really, really tough. If an arrest is lawful, even if they've jumped through all the hoops correctly, a detention of the prisoner for an unreasonable time without taking him before a committing magistrate will constitute false imprisonment. They have to let you go. So this is bringing an arrested person before a magistrate. When I was arrested, I asked 4 times very, very specifically, so it got on the tape, to be taken to a magistrate. And just as what this treaty says, just for convenience, we don't do that anymore. You're going to be taken directly to jail. So there's more prima facie evidence this was a false arrest and imprisonment, and somebody in the state of Alaska should be held liable for this. And I should have made the claim of arrest and false imprisonment, because what that would have done was just completely shift the burden of proof to the guy who did the arrest, or the prosecutor, however they throw it to. And this is just really, really strong. The duty of the officer, it is a fundamental rule of procedure well grounded in the common law that where an arrest is made, the alleged offender is to be taken before a magistrate to be dealt with according to law. This is not only to be done, but to be done without delay or without unnecessarily delay. Otherwise, the arresting party is liable for false imprisonment. This treatise also gives us an example of somebody who, an arresting officer who pulled off to the side of the road and sat under the tree with the prisoner and made an unnecessary delay, and so the arrest was deemed to be unlawful. You can't even, the person has to be taken directly before a magistrate or judicial tribunal, and that's the only purpose for allowing officers of the peace or code enforcement officers to have this kind of power, is because they need to be taken before a magistrate so they can determine, based on the merits of the case, the facts, and by due process, whether or not this person should be thrown in jail. So it's very, very strong. I think when I first read this, I was very surprised at how strong the law is on arrest. And it's really, really obvious why the powers that be don't want people to know about this, because if they did know about it, they'd start enforcing it. So we've got to make sure we know this and that we share it with people, and that we start enforcing it, because basically the only moral code by the actors of this corporation, these corporate governments, the only moral code is profit. The only thing they care about is profit. And, you know, we can get into a little bit more about how each court case is designed to help them administer a pile of money that's been put somewhere in the name of your estate, which is your vessel in commerce. We can talk a little bit about how those proceedings are administrative procedures, how you, the man, are the beneficiary of the estate of the defendant, and how the defendant is the estate that's being administered in these constructive trusts that are being created when a court case happens. But just suffice it to say that the powers that be do not want us to understand the common law. They don't want us to understand due profit. They want us to keep making fallacious, bad arguments about right to travel, and basically standing on our quote constitutional rights, which they don't have any obligation to uphold as long as there's a contract, because of the type of jurisdiction that they're presuming us to be under. Anyway, the big message here is know your common law, read this treatise, get a copy of it, and start teaching people what they can do and who they are and how to deal with these code enforcement officers that are coming at them with a profit motive to get them involved in a contract that's devoid of due process. All right. What have we got? Questions and clarifications and things like that. And do we have Chuck on the line, and do we have Peter on the line at all tonight?
I think Peter was going to be on Gus's show this evening. He had shot me a message earlier today.
Oh, okay. So Gus has got a show on Wednesday nights?
I believe so.
Oh, okay. All right. I know they've got the health show on Tuesday nights, but I think sometimes, yeah, Gus does a Wednesday night show. So was there anything in that that you hadn't read about before? That was to you, Chris.
Yeah, actually, this is the first time I've ever read the treatise.
Is it as surprising to you as it was to me?
Pretty much. It really is. It's really surprising that this is not taught.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hard reading, absolutely.
All right. Go ahead, sir.
This absolutely should be required reading in any kind of law school situation or any kind of educational setting, for sure.
I'd be surprised. I'm pretty sure that when I was going through my case, the police officer didn't know what the law on arrest was, and we gave him a copy of this, and he took it from us.
Did he ever get back with you?
We haven't gotten back with him, and I wouldn't expect him to get back with us, but we haven't gotten back to him to find out what he knows, but it's pretty obvious that the cops are being trained by I think he told Bill this, that they get trained by the attorneys that are working for the city. And basically all they're doing is exploiting. They're exploiting the statutes, the gray areas.
Well, that alone is disconcerting that they've got bar attorneys teaching the people that they interact with. That's a whole conflict of interest in those, firsthand.
Yeah. Yep. Well, and this material is good enough to take to your city council, because who is it that's running the police shops? It's the cities. No matter who they are, I mean, even if the cities are franchises of a state that's a franchise of a federal corporation, still, the buck's got to stop somewhere locally.
A good recommendation is everybody that has where the means to do, maybe print a couple of copies of this out, carry them down to your local police department, and ask to see the sergeant, or somewhere along the lines, or if you know somebody, hand a couple copies through.
Yep. Or when when it's time for a meeting of the city council or of the borough assembly or whatever. I've done this. I did it in 2017. I put together a conversation about this that I could just read for 5 minutes in front of the city council. And I explained what the law on arrest and imprisonment is, the false arrest and imprisonment laws. I went through it. And I was called a sovereign citizen by Jerry Cleworth. He said something about my sovereign citizen beliefs. I was just appalled. He's supposed to be one of the good guys.
I really like Jerry Cleworth, and he's been a good resource for sure around the town to learn a lot of different things about some of the backdoor dealings and whatnot. But he's definitely got his comfort level, and he's also got his education level. Where I guess we all fit different places for the most part, but we're all trying to get towards the better page.
Oh yeah, no, and the attitude always has to be forgiveness, of course, because everybody's at a different place in their education, but still. We go way back, and I didn't think he'd be calling me names like that, but he did, right in front of God and everybody. So I had to take him out. I had to come back 2 or 3 more times and talk about the evils of calling somebody a sovereign citizen, and I still don't think I've done a thorough job, but I think he got the message for sure. But the point is that this is all through here. It's like well-settled law. So what does it mean when you bring law to your public people, the public so-called government, and instead of appreciating the fact that you're being lawful, you're studying law, you know law, those kinds of things, instead of being forthright and upholding the law, they go after you as a domestic terrorist for bringing the law into the public. That's just amazing.
The thing is, you and Bill right there. You're one case. I'm another case. Lyndall on the line. She's another case. I mean, we've just got tons of Chuck. I mean, we've got lots and lots and lots of cases of these things.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not isolated, is what you're saying.
No, they take it as a threat. It's a threat to the transition from common law to the takeover of the UCC system to overburden it and just kind of blot it out through ignorance.
Well, and it's really profitable. And if I wanted to point out a couple of different things to people who might be downloading this show later, and that is there's a guy that tells you how to sue their ass off, and that's a website called We.gov. He's got a talk show, and I looked him up, and I'm following that talk show, and I can't think of what the name of it is. Anyway, the website is We.gov. I believe it's .com. We.gov.com, and that is about whenever somebody comes at you and they're in a position of authority in the public, they're an officer of some kind of the corporations that are operating as our governments, they come at you today you need to come back with a lawsuit today. Because what that means is they have deprived you or they've caused you a harm, an injury, or a loss as they've executed their duties, and they have bonds to cover them for doing things like that. And sometimes they're malicious, and sometimes they're just ignorance. But regardless, if you suffer a loss, that you've got to bring the complaint or the claim so that, it's instructive. It doesn't even have to be for money, but it can be. But it's instructive to them. They're not going to keep doing it over and over again if they are at risk of losing their jobs. So that's WeVGov. And the other one is a guy called Mark Emery. His name is called Mark Emery, and he has a YouTube channel called Lighthouse Law Club. And there is an absolutely brilliant video called, it's Status, Standing, and Agency. If you look up Mark Emery, Status, Standing, and Agency, and it tells you what's really going on in the courtroom when they're administering your estate. Well, it's not your estate. They're administering the estate of the defendant, and you are the man who is the grantor and beneficiary of that estate. And it goes to the way you answer when your case is called and you think that's your name they're calling, and where and how you answer that you're not there in a representative capacity, you're not the surety, you're not the debtor, you are not the defendant, you are the man who is the beneficiary of the estate of the defendant. And the way that looks, the estate of the defendant looks like your given name, first, middle, and last, styled as all caps. That's not you. That's an estate. That's a trust account. So he really shows you how to hit back hard if you're dragged in. And it's kind of like this law on false imprisonment. If you're ignorant of it, you can't stand up and defend against a false imprisonment. You can't swing around and say, hey, I'm charging you with false imprisonment, and know that the burden of proof now is on them that they didn't falsely imprison you. Same thing with this being the being the beneficiary of the estate of the defendant. If you know that, you're going to be in the driver's seat when it comes to your time to go in. So anyway, look up Lighthouse Law Club and look up Status, Standing, and Agency, and look up WeVGov if you're involved in any of these things. And the other thing interesting too, notices liability, and you can talk a lot more about that, Chris, or at least a little bit about it.
Sorry, come back again. I lost you for a second.
What was that?
I think I lost you there for the last little bit of what you said.
Oh, just notices liability? I was saying that was an important piece of the puzzle.
Oh, for sure, the notice of liability. Yeah, it gives them the sledgehammer but velvet touch of the law to let them be aware that they're liable, personally liable. And that's one of the key elements, I think, to kind of clearing the air and giving them the heads up that they can be personally liable, so you can move forward with any suits against the man or woman that has caused you harm. There's those that have not been on some of the prior show. There's a really great thing you can look up. It's called Empower Movement. They're based out of Canada, but they've really been geared towards the 5G technologies of the smart meters and whatnot. And it's a little more in depth, I think, than a lot of notice liabilities really need to be. but they're trying to take a different perspective, kind of a bulletproof, legal, lawful perspective across the board, where operating in the common law, I don't think it really needs to be so complex. It really can be just a simple statement of who you're noticing and why, and maybe even giving them a little bit of their the law that they do not know, just like you were talking about, Grant. Giving them the heads up that they are beholden to this law. This is your law, not my law, but this is your law, and you're causing harm, and we're going to bring the hammer down on you if you don't leave us alone or stop causing harm or continue acting in the way and the means that you have been. That's really kind of been hard a little bit too recently. Is I've been watching some of the videos with Drew that he's got first-handed from when he was down there at the DAPL pipeline protest there in North Dakota. And the way that these people, in fact, we're going to start posting some of these. A lot of these may never have been seen even online, but these will be videos of some of the interactions between these paid mercenary thugs that cover their badges and their names and all this and hide behind these shields and take direct action against our fellow brother and sisters, the fellow natives. And it's pretty disconcerting, the fact that these people know that they're acting against not only men and women, but on land, where there's treaties, and they just, corporations don't mind breaking treaties if it's in their interest, and especially whenever they get the backing. Like when Trump came in, it was just literally a week or two before they just crushed them. They knocked them out of all the camps and ran them out. Total fear tactics, not to mention the use of weapons that are considered weapons of mass destruction or something along those lines for those radar units. Like you can't use them, and they can't use them under the GA because they're such extreme weapons.
Yeah, we're online now.
Yeah, and it's okay to use them in our own country though, on our own people. These people are using these weapons against our people. In fact, Fairbanks has two of them in our little town up here in Fairbanks, Alaska. They've got two of these radar type units to where they can turn on the people any given time, but these are considered weapons that cannot be used in the realm of war, even like what's been happening in the Middle East. But they're okay.
What are these weapons called? What are they technically called? Do you have any idea?
I can pull them up here, and it'll just take me a second.
Yeah, I'd be interested to have some information on that, because it always makes me wonder if this has something to do with your condition and your status as a political status or a civil status. If you think about the phrase "in this state," it means in this condition. And that refers to your political status if you are in the condition of subservient to all of the corporations and the corporate officers, you're low man on the totem pole, and you happen to be in that condition. Some of the statutory language is in this state. Okay, so what it means is if you are in this state, in the state of Alaska, and you're one of the citizens of the United States, so your political status is United States citizen, and you're coming under not the common law, but you've agreed to come under some other system, a bad system, a system that doesn't believe in protecting your rights, but just basically taking from you.
Right.
This is the kind of legal, we all know this kind of legal chicanery that happens that allows that they give themselves special dispensation to pirate and to do all the things that pirates do against you. And so it may be the case. I mean, you and I noticed that in the reports coming out of California, they've got all the people of the state of California written as nom de guerre, which would be your war name, as if the people of California are enemies of whoever is running these wildfires against the peoples of California, the people. Makes me wonder if they've been redefined, a citizen has been redefined as an enemy combatant in that situation.
Which is what they've been working on for a while. I mean, you mentioned it earlier, talking about the SOCIT, movement, and that was actually at the Department of Homeland Security. And realistically, with the technology they have and the ability to track and monitor and listen and see everything, even if you type a message and you deleted it before you even said it, they've got it. And they've got everything they need to basically probably color anybody any direction they want. So with artificial intelligence and these computer systems nowadays, there's nothing secure that's technological.
Well, I think it really does make a difference to go through and figure out who you are and what your status and standing ought to be, and put that claim out there on the public record and give notice that it's like the notice of liability. It's fair warning that if you come at me, you're not coming at one of your regular citizen people. You're coming at something different. And what that is somebody who knows the law, who knows how to defend themselves, and somebody who knows how to go after you. You know, we're coming after you. We're not leaving it up to Trump to make all the indictments and indict people for criminal activity. We, the nationals of the states, are coming after you, the ones that are hiding behind a Nuremberg defense.
So the acoustic device is called an LRAD.
Okay,
and
LRAD.
It's a long-range acoustics device. But I noticed here, too, that they've started trying to call it a long-range acoustic hailing device, like it's trying to get somebody's attention. Well, it's absolutely getting their attention because it can cause heart attacks. It can cause the body to sweat and break out into almost hives by the frequencies it emits. It's probably like, think of it as like a long-range reach out and touch somebody with electricity kind of thing. With frequencies.
Yeah, and
so
you can
they're basically electrocuting people to different, targeting different systems of the body.
Mm-hmm.
But this is okay to use in America, in the republics. Our republic states, we are allowing corporations to get away with using this.
Oh, this is my question. Can you really use it in the republics, or can you only use it in the democracy? Because
well, in a republic, no, because it would never be approved for here anyway. We would never have any of these costume thugs running around like they're who they are, in a republic.
Well,
but we have a democracy.
But what you're not, maybe what you're not seeing is that we have both occupying the same space.
No, I understand that, but the thing is, those weapons don't discriminate.
Right. And so, and this is what I'm trying to say is when you start to see how it's being done. Okay, let's just say it's being done. Maybe I'm right. It's being done because people are U.S. citizens, and they're presuming everybody inside the borders of Alaska are U.S. citizens. Okay?
Oh, correct.
So here's an interesting case that our friend our friend at our common law group says this has no bearing on anything, Maria, but just listen to this. Just listen to the logic of this. It's regarding to National Mutual Insurance Company of D.C. versus Tidewater, Virginia, I believe, the township. It says Congress has exclusive legislative, it's the upshot of a U.S., probably a landmark case. I can't tell you for sure. Congress has exclusive legislative jurisdiction over citizens of Washington District of Columbia, and through their plenary power nationally, covers those citizens even when in one of the several states, as though the district expands for the purpose of regulating its citizens wherever they go through, state or union. So, you give Washington District of Columbia your oath of fealty by saying, yeah, I'll be one of your citizens. Anywhere you go, anywhere in the world, the District of Columbia expands for the purpose of regulating you. Now, what you've done is you have allowed those crooks in D.C., the swamp creatures, basically to follow you anywhere you go. It doesn't matter if the states are republics. It's like slime. It attaches to you and it doesn't let go.
You're right, and that's kind of part with, I heard something just with one of these political talking heads recently where they made it a point to say, well, so, and it may have, I don't know who it was, they said something along the lines of, so you mean an American citizen's rights are followed with them wherever they are on the globe?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it was towards the whole terrorism thing, right? So basically, if you're involved over there, you should still be, you should still have your rights as a citizen upheld wherever you are. So that means they can execute you pretty much anywhere if you can take that.
Well, and when you're talking about citizenship, a citizen and a person and rights in the same sentence, you're not talking about rights. You're talking about privileges and immunities. That's the way the Constitution has been redefined for citizens. You have certain privileges and immunities. You don't have any rights. You have just what we give you and nothing more. So when we're talking about a privilege or a benefit could be jail time. Benefit could be lethal injection. Benefit could be anything we spend money on.
That's exactly
in regards
right. I mean, everything. Right. Everything they say, period. I mean, that's the way this slime talks. It talks in that double talk, in that legalese double talk. If they're saying for the benefit, they're definitely not talking for our benefit. They're talking for their corporate benefit. People really they see these things. Yeah. And these are corporations. This is not your hometown, serve on your little local community council. These are corporations. These are McDonald's. You go to your state, I'm going to say it again. That's your Sam's Club or your Walmart or Marshall Law, Walmart, whatever the hell it is. Oh, I learned a new fact. Did you know that Sam Walken built camps in Nazi Germany? Interesting.
No.
Before he became Walmart. State helm.
Huh.
Where they keep the kids out of from the borders right now in the Walmart.
Oh, really? Huh.
Downtown with all this immigration thing. What was the big thing? Even one of their congressmen that tried to get over and get access into one of these Walmart detention centers for the children they were being separated from whoever it was that was dragging them across the border. Walmart.
Wow. Huh.
Right in front of us. I mean, right in front of us.
Yeah. Yeah, those who have eyes to see will see it. Well, and that's why we bother. There are people that will see. There are people that will take it up. They'll take the ball and run with it. God knows who it's going to be and what they're going to do, and just. But be peaceable, be lawful, be loving, understand where common law is coming from, what motivation it's coming from. It's really to restore our freedom is the motivation we're coming from.
Absolutely.
So to the degree we talk about corrupt officials and state actors and things like that, it's not out of hatred in our hearts. It's out of the objective to be the church, to be lawful, to carry out, to stand up for common law, which is the only one that makes any sense.
Right. I mean, and I think we can express this if we can just be in front of enough people and just to understand, okay, here's a one-page form, and this has got, say, 10 maxims on here, right? Say 10 maxims of the law. Okay, Can you agree to this? Or would you rather have this 10 million statutes and codes that you could not ever read in your entire lifetime, and they're adding 10,000 or more a year? Do you want to go by this? Do you want to go by this?
Well, yeah. I mean, how is it possible to expect anybody to behave lawfully if it's impossible to understand what they're expected to do? It's pretty simple. If you're going to be expected to carry out, basically expected to live on the right side of the law, don't you have to have a pretty good idea of what the right side of the law is? We can't afford to hire a lawyer to ask them if we can take a step here or every time we need to know what to do, we can't go running around hiring lawyers. I wouldn't want to anyway, but
absolutely not, because you're not acting as a man and woman and having the ability to make your own decision and pay your own prices for failures. Whenever you have to ask a master for, what can I do, master?
Yeah. Well, you can't even pump your own gas if you live in New Jersey.
Or Oregon. And Oregon.
Or Oregon. I mean, my gosh. Anyway, yeah. Hopefully people will grab a hold of some of this information. Is Drew here?
He is. I was just fixing to get him to talk a little bit and share what's on his mind right now.
So you want to know about dogs? I'm wishing.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, start looking
Whatever.
for food. The more you run, the more food they eat. But they're also happier and healthier to get a lot of exercise.
Yeah. Yep. They got to get out there. Hey, how did you ever get started with that? Were you up here already, or what got you started?
It was about 20 years ago, and I was snow machining out by Cantwell. And I lost my coffee cup, and a dog musher found it, and I ended up talking to him, and then I followed him to Fairbanks here. So that was, I don't know if you know John Hogberg, but that was a while ago.
What's his name?
Hogberg, John Hogberg. He did the wagon rides in Fairbanks for years, and dog rides and so forth.
Huh. No, I don't. I know my friend Natalie went out with Musher for a while, but it didn't work out.
They usually don't. If you have to pay attention to 20 dogs, it's hard for the other person. It's not getting any attention. So.
Yeah. So do you have 20 dogs or?
Yes.
So how long have you followed that guy into Fairbanks? Had you been to Fairbanks before?
No, I arrived in Seward and worked in fish processing for a winter, which was a bit of a nightmare. And then but Seward was nice.
Yeah.
Then I figured before I got too busy with anything, I should travel around Alaska. So I went to Kenai and Manly and, up Coldfoot and Weisman and, traveled around. And so I'm glad I got to do that when I had a chance before I had all the dogs.
And so you decided to settle out just outside of Fairbanks and start accumulating?
Well, I tried to retire in Minnesota, but it was too warm down there. And so I thought, for sure, one thing Fairbanks has is cold weather. And I was just looking at the historical data from 7 years ago. Although it did warm up to 20 degrees by the end of the month, it started out every day was 36 below, up to 10 below, then 40 below, then 8 below. You know what I mean? It's much colder than now, obviously.
It was much colder than now, huh? Yeah.
So
What
I
year
actually
was
have
that?
to rethink dog mushing into more of a year-long thing than, before you'd wait 3 months and then winter would start again. Now it's 9 months.
Yeah. True. Yeah. What year was it when you were having the nice cold temperatures?
It's 98, 97, early 2000. I think it was pretty cold. Then even recently, in the last 4 years ago, it was I came up for a month and it never got above 20 below. So not that long ago, really.
Yeah, just we don't have cold winters every year now.
Right.
I've been here since 04. Bill's been here since 01, but we don't have. It seems like every year it's less and less of a full solid couple weeks of below. It used to be down at least 2 solid weeks of 40 below or more.
Right.
Throughout the winter.
So I guess, as a musher, that sort of begs the question, then, okay, if not in Fairbanks, where do you go? Because you go north of here, it's warmer, up by the water. It's supposed to be the cold spot.
Fairbanks is supposed to be the coldest spot? Is that what you're saying?
That's what I always thought.
Oh, okay. Well, it seems that
I think the only place I saw staying cold was Greenland, and maybe even north of Sweden and Norway, it was about 50 degrees in the water up there right now.
Oh, yeah. So are we in a period of warming?
I couldn't say that for sure. It could be they did that test, right, when you put warm water in the fridge and cold water in the fridge, and the warm water froze quicker. It kicked the compressor on earlier, so maybe that's happening. I'm guessing it's going to get really cold is what I'm saying.
Oh, uh-huh. So what are your dogs' names? Is it like on Dasher, on Dancer, on Prancer, on Vixen, and that kind of thing?
That's right. There's teams for each litter. So this year I had on Thanksgiving Day I actually had a litter of puppies. There was 4 of them. Beautiful, like a little white one looks like a polar bear, and one looks like a little racing dog, or with a model like a pie face, or I don't know how you describe it, but a lot of colors and highlights. And so of course they have names, like you can already guess what their names are, being born on Thanksgiving.
Pocahontas? No.
No, they're not Democrats.
Okay. Actually, the first thing that came to mind was John Smith. But...
like mashed potatoes, gravy, green bean casserole.
Pumpkin pie.
So I started off with all Swedish, traditional Swedish names for the dogs. But I tried to explain what they were to people, and if you can't roll your R or have like a soft J sound, they're hard to pronounce.
Well, what would they be? What would they sound like? What are some of them?
The dogs now, I have we have Geode, because his eyes look like a geode.
Mm-hmm.
We have Hansen, and Hansen, that's the O. And after a while, you start running low on names. So we have Colby, and Dorothy, Supergirl, Lake, BC, Little Hansen, Hans, and Shara. And that's an example of one of the leftover Swedish names.
Which one is?
Shara. It's spelled with a K, A with 2 dots over it, R and an A.
Shara?
It means, Shara means dear one. You might sign a letter like dear sweetheart or something like Shara Hanukkah.
Huh. Cool. Neat. Yeah. And so, do you run the dogs competitively?
I would say so. It's a competition just to flip them all up and go a few miles up at the wind. But yes, I think I have a lot of talent in my team. They're mostly a younger team, so I'll definitely be hit some races this winter.
So who do people contact? How do they contact you if they want to go out? And do you take people for rides?
You bet. You can go to mushalaska.com.
Mushalaska.com.
Correct.
Cool.
And know that, when you go for a dog sled ride, you can be happy to know that you're actually supporting a online radio program at the same time.
Yeah.
Actually, it's not a big, we're not running buses through. It's we get a chance to meet people and talk about their lives and more than just a tour. It's to hang out for a while, see everything that happens.
Well, and it's beautiful out. I mean, it's the surroundings of Fairbanks is just really pretty to be in.
Always, it's easy to remember to be grateful when you're out there.
Can you repeat that? What did you say?
Here in Alaska,
Uh-huh.
it's really easy to remember to be grateful.
Oh.
Because like when you live in the city, sometimes you're like, oh, this is drudgery, or want to get out of here, and you're not really happy with it. So you're not really thankful for the things you might have at that time because other things are bothering you.
Mhm.
So that's one thing I find about Alaska in general is you don't have to go far to go, that's really nice, or really, that feels good, or I'm happy to be here right now.
It's kind of interesting because when I first came up here to Alaska, I had never experienced such cold. And it made me think about different kinds of considerations I've never had to make in my life. And I was almost 40 when I moved up here. And these were things like, better pack up a bunch of clothes in the back of the car and things that you might need if you get stuck. Because if you do get stuck somewhere, there may not be too many other cars going by that could help you, and you may end up having to rely on everything you've got in your car to survive for however long. And so, honestly, I had never thought about survival, my own survival, as much as I do while I'm here. I still think about it all the time. How am I going to survive? And what that did for me was basically put me more in touch with reality than I had ever been in touch with it living in a pretty warm, nice, sunny climates of, I'd been in Utah, we'd lived in Italy and Turkey and Germany, and Germany's pretty cold, but lived all over the world in relatively mild climates. There weren't, wild animals, many animals that could really, that were really pervasive in the places where I lived. So there wasn't a whole lot of thought about survival. Here, we're really in touch with our need to take care of ourselves. And I think that's, it kind of goes hand in hand with that grateful attitude too, because you're thinking about it, and you are doing it. You're surviving. You're living. You're grateful for every day that you're still able to be here. So, and I don't know, some part of that directed us to really start figuring out all this stuff about our status and standing and common law.
How is it that we have come to thinking
who we really are.
that anyone has more to say than you?
Good.
Well, I think in one way, when you're out
Stand
there,
up,
60
sing
below,
your song.
lost,
Let us
something crazy.
know the wisdom of your heart.
It seems like laws,
That you
common law,
belong,
or
that we
codes or any of those kind
belong to you.
aren't relevant.
That you belong to us, and that
So there's a bit of
love is all
a
in
emphasis there, I guess, of great, kind of what's important, or what you really choose what you want to do instead of maybe what someone else wants you to do for them.
How do we dance? How do we take that first step and commit to take a chance? Believe, just relax, 'cause no one ever died of trying to take the music back. Just leave it to them others to excuse. State your heart, be yourself. Oh, help us understand it's you and everybody else. I'll take a breath and I'll see it through. You know that I am more myself when I'm standing up for you. How is it that we don't see the pain which we exchange for circumstance made easy to believe in, where everybody's loss becomes a gain? Come forth, reach out your hand, be your brother's keeper this one time. Say he belongs, say we belong to him, that he belongs to us and that our love is all in truth.